Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our final day of this 2023 PD Extravaganza. We are here for part two of this workshop presented by Rich Madel on teaching culture as content. Today, the how. Rich's presentation from yesterday is recorded and up on our YouTube channel, as this one will be sometime this afternoon. Again, if you have any questions at any time, please feel free to put them in the chat. I'm sure we'll have a very engaging and lively chat session just like we did yesterday. And of course, stick around for the feedback form at the end so you can get entry into our giveaway and give feedbacks to Rich on how he did over the past 2 days. So Rich, take it away.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Day two, although for some of you, this is day 4, day 5. I don't know. It's been a marathon event, and I'm really grateful that I'm seeing a lot of the same names and same faces from yesterday. I think we had a really cool session yesterday morning. So to continue that conversation, I'm really looking forward to that. If you were not here yesterday, don't worry. We're going to start with just like a really quick recap of some of the key takeaways from yesterday, so that we can all be on the right footing for this morning. So just a reiteration, today we're talking about teaching culture as content in our language classrooms. Yesterday, we focused on a little bit more of the theoretical. We kind of talked about like what that is and why we should be doing that. Today, I really want to focus on the tangible. I want to focus on how we go about doing that. Before I get ahead of myself, for those of you guys that were not here yesterday for my introduction, my name is Rich Madel. I am a Spanish teacher by trade, many years in the biz. Another hat that I wear is that I'm the chairperson of the Department of World Languages in my district. That's a 6 through 12 program. And so I have my hands in the mix of designing curriculum for a lot more classes than I teach myself. What I mentioned yesterday was that what I'm going to share with you today, the approaches that I'm going to share with you today, and the tips, the tricks of what I do to teach culture as content. I mean, this is stuff that is directly related from what I do in my classroom, but also directly related with what my students and our district's students experience in any of the classes in our program. I had mentioned yesterday that one of my credentials is that I'm a doctor of education. And what that means more than anything else is that my research focus for some time now has really been on the intersection of language acquisition theories and principles and classroom practices. And so one of the ways that I seek to have my students acquire languages and make things highly relevant and highly comprehensible to them is I use culture as a driving force in my courses. And I do it in the target language. And so that's one of the things that we're going to talk about today in terms of how to do all of those things. And I should also say, and I think I failed to mention this yesterday, but as an individual, I have traveled a lot, and I have a feeling that I am not alone in that my experiences abroad, my experiences in the world, in large part, have motivated my interests and my passions in the classroom. In other words, the experiences that I've accumulated are things that I want to be sharing with my students. The firsthand experiences that I've had in and around my target culture, I seek to bring them into my classroom so that my students can also be able to experience them. And so again, this is one of my driving forces as to why I so highly value teaching culture as content in my classroom. And like I said, I have a feeling that I'm in good company when we talk about being passionate about sharing those cultural experiences and those cultural nuances with our students. All right, so that being said, yesterday, we went over some key concepts. We kind of defined what is intercultural communication and why is that a valuable domain for our students to be developing. We dissected that into kind of cultural competence and also language proficiency, how both of those come into play when developing intercultural communication. We talked about how important language proficiency is for us as teachers to kind of have a lens of what can our students do so that We can make sure that we're crafting classroom experiences that target their ability so that we can really maintain the content and the conversation and the interpretation and the reaction in the target language as much as possible. We defined what culture is. This is, I know it seems, obvious, but this was really important. Yesterday, we defined what culture is. And in particular, we were using this 3 Ps paradigm. If you're not familiar with the 3 Ps paradigm, I wanted to make sure that I added this today because we're going to be referring to these 3 Ps a bunch in today's session. And that is, when we talk about culture, we dissected it into these 3 Ps. Products, practices, and perspectives. I mentioned yesterday when I am using culture as content, I use these 3 Ps explicitly with my students. They are familiar with the terms productos, prácticas, y perspectivas when we're interpreting a text, when we're interpreting a visual, when we're discussing and reacting. I'm specifically asking them to identify products, to identify practices, and to tap into perspectives. I try to simplify it for them because I recognize that they don't need to get as heady as we do. And so I say, what are products? It answers the question, what? We're looking for nouns. Practices, it answers the question, how are people interacting? We're looking for verbs. The why, when I want them to think of the whys, I want them to think of historical context. I want them to think of traditions that could influence modern day practices. I want them to think of economic influences, geographic influences, legal, political influence, all of those things that could impact modern day products and practices. I'm looking for them. And again, this is explicit to my students. They're familiar with me asking these kind of questions. We also, yesterday, we talked about ambiguity tolerance and how important that is. Are students feeling comfortable in this is new and I don't fully understand it, but yet I still think that I can use what I already know to come to some novel sense of what I'm viewing. And how valuable that is when we're developing intercultural communicators or just global citizens, just decent neighbors. So those are a lot of the key concepts that we had discussed yesterday. Today, I want to talk about a few different things. Again, today where the rubber is meeting the road. And so I want to talk about the value of authentic materials in our classrooms. I'm going to demonstrate a lesson template that we can all use no matter what level we're teaching, no matter what language we're teaching, no matter what our target culture is. I'm going to demonstrate how we can use that model. I will show you, once you get comfortable, how you can just kind of modify and vary that model, something that I do often at this point because I've been using it for so long. And I'm also going to show you how I enhance my storytelling and I apply a lot of comprehensible input techniques using culture as content. Okay, so a lot to do today, not a lot of time to do it. So let's start a conversation about authentic materials. And when we are talking about authentic materials, we really need to address the elephant in the room. The elephant in the room whenever we talk about authentic materials is, well, what actually are authentic materials? How do we define authentic materials? I'm going to be asking for a lot of interaction during today's session. This is step 1. Anybody want to take a stab if you had to define authentic materials? Anybody want to throw some ideas in the chat? How would you define authentic materials? Giselle already saying those that just do not come from a textbook. Red flag, textbook, red flag. Anything not made for a language learner, says Grant. Real language, says Johanna. Created by native speakers for native speakers, says Parker. Real life situations. Johanna double dipping. We'll take that. Resources for native speakers. Who is a native speaker, says Jason? A very appropriate question, I'd say. unaltered materials. Articles, short stories, videos, newscasts, podcasts, current events. By and for speakers of the target language for a purpose other than learning, says Karen. Fairy tales, folklores. And why is all right? So listen, we have a lot of really awesome ideas in the chat. We also have some really awesome questions in the chat, which I think are totally, totally relevant here. And this is why when we talk about authentic materials, we have to address that elephant. We have to come to consensus here. One of the themes that I see in the chat is this: the for native speakers, by native speakers. This is the definition that is, I think, most commonly kind of bandied about in our field when we talk about authentic. However, I have a problem with this. This idea of for native speakers and by native speakers, Martha, does Martha also have a problem with this? This to me is really problematic. This is a definition that is exclusionary at its core. Someone mentioned in here why isn't my classroom authentic? Martha, that was you. Why isn't the classroom an authentic place? And so here's the thing, and I go back to this all the time with my colleagues. When a student walks into my classroom and I say, "Buenos días, ¿cómo estás?" I am not practicing greetings. It is a genuine question, and I want to know how my student is feeling. I am not a native speaker. My student is not a native speaker. Is that interaction therefore inauthentic? I would argue absolutely not. And I would argue that there could be nothing more authentic than a teacher genuinely wanting to know how their student is when they walk in the door. And so for that reason, this definition to me is problematic. It's exclusionary. And so when you look at ACTFL's definition, which is really just like a really confusing way of saying the first thing, the text written by members of a language and culture group for members of the same language and culture group, that too seems really problematic. And it's for the same reason. And again, I think to a colleague of mine, was born in Paris. She is Parisian to her core. English is her second language. And by this definition, when she writes an email to me, the English that she's using is not authentic. But again, if you ever met my colleague, anything that comes out of her mouth, I dare you to tell her is not authentic. So these definitions to me are really problematic, mainly because they're exclusionary. But also when we talk about kind of the logistical implications of this for teachers, it ends up really narrowing what it is that we can use as a tool in our classroom. And so this was mentioned in the chat, but I got to be honest, this is probably one of the simplest and the best definitions that we can think of when we talk about authentic materials. It's just any type of material that just hasn't been created with a learner in mind. There you go. That's it. It's so simple, and it so broadens the scope for us to not have to wonder, well, where was the author born? That's irrelevant. It is irrelevant. I'm loving the chat. You guys, come on. Gas me up. Let's go.
Can I ask you a question, Rich? I can't.
By all means, Martha, by all means.
So I teach level 1. They're 8th graders, 13 and 14 years old. Trying to keep them engaged, I use a lot of, current cultural things, music videos, etc. So if I'm using that as the authentic resource and we're looking at some of the high frequency structures in the lyrics, but then we also create a story around it, why wouldn't that be authentic? Or if I'm comprehensifying something from an article that they're never going to read, 6 paragraphs of more technical or academic speech, can I still call that authentic if I've extrapolated from that?
Listen, as far as I am concerned, anything that was genuinely communicative at its core, anything that had the purpose of communicating a message is, as far as I'm concerned, meeting the criteria of authentic, right? So something that is not contrived, something that is not for practice but rather something that in its inception was designed to communicate something, had an audience in mind. Again, that is not a learner, and even that, again, you could have learners as an audience, and that's fine too. That to me, it's communicative. I go back to Bill Van Patten's definition of communication, right? It's any written or spoken text that has a purpose and has an intended audience. Game on, as far as I'm concerned. Now, Martha, you had mentioned kind of like there are a lot of pros to using authentic materials, even though there are also some cons. And I think that it's relevant that we mention both of these. One of the reasons why we want to be using authentic materials is that they are going to provide rich content for our learners. I'm saying I'm working with 8th graders. High interest materials are invaluable in our practice, right? And so authentic materials are oftentimes going to be more engaging than the stuff that I can create. The production values of stuff that is coming from our target culture community are just so much better than the stuff that I can create. And to the core of this session, the very definition of working with a resource that's coming from our target culture is that culture is very naturally embedded into it. It cannot be separated from the text itself. And so therefore, it automatically is going to be giving us opportunities to analyze and to dissect and to interpret the cultural nuances of that text. And I should also say too, that there is a psychological and an emotional component to working with authentic resources successfully. And that is, our students feel a sense of an accomplishment when they can interact and engage with the text that was not written for them, and they can walk away saying, wow, I did that. That's something positive. That's something that we want, that we want to cultivate. On the flip side, however, and again, we have to be transparent about this. On the flip side, there are definitely some cons of working with authentic materials. By the fact that they were not designed for the learners, it means that they're going to be running into language that has not been designed for them, and therefore it will be more challenging for them. And it requires a ton of scaffolding, purposeful scaffolding on my part, to make sure that my students are able to access the resource. But these authentic materials, they're not coming with a list of activities for me. And frankly, that sucks, because that means that I have to create it. And again, let's call a spade a spade. That means it's more work on my end. The other side of the coin of that psychological, emotional component is that if we have our students working with authentic materials and we did not set them up for success, in other words, we're giving them an authentic material that they cannot access successfully, instead of them feeling a sense of accomplishment, what we've done is we've created a scenario where they can walk away feeling deflated, they can feel frustrated. And if that compounds over time, those are your students that are saying, I'm not good at languages, and then they leave your program. So that's, we want to be really careful about the resources that we are using, or how we're setting our students up to accessing these resources. To just say, oh, I found a good one, have at it. We want to be really careful about that. But there's a ton of value in using authentic materials, and I want to make sure that we have that ability. There's a ton of stuff going on in the chat. Grant, if you see anything that's like, let's pause the show and go for it, you'll let me know. By all means, anybody can open their mic and go for it, but there's a lot going on there. And I thank you for that. Side chat away, please. Oh man, can we go back to Park's question about readers? All right, fine, let's do it. Let's do Park.
Yeah, Rich, I thought this was a good question. I think the conversation about authentic materials is really interesting. Yeah, so Parker says, how do readers fit in here? Aren't they designed for language learners?
Yeah, they absolutely are. And I would say that the readers that I think we are accustomed to, the ones that are coming out of Wayside or Fluency Matters or TPRS books or whatever, those are not authentic materials. However, that is not to say that they are not communicative. That is not to say that they don't have a place in our classroom. I use at least one reader per course. I think that they are one of the most valuable resources that we have as teachers that are teaching for acquisition. One of the greatest things that these readers do is that they provide me an opportunity to go take detours. And from those detours, I can then supplement and I can enrich using stuff from the target culture that are, again, more authentic in the sense that I'm pulling them not designed for my students in mind, like the readers are. So again, it's not to say that there's not value there, but it is to say that they are not necessarily presenting the same authentic language that we might see in some of those other materials. So I hope that
Sorry, is it okay if I pipe in again?
Go ahead, please.
I'll try my best to keep quiet the rest of the session. I just I watched a webinar last night with Diego Ojeda talking about, are they authentic resources? And he talked about, although the language is simplified for the learner, first of all, that's the same way that a children's book, authentic children's book for a young child is not going to be presented in the same language as it would be for a teen, adult, etc. But furthermore, the cultural content in those readers is authentic.
Yes.
Or you want it to be authentic. Not all readers are created equally.
Absolutely. And I will say too, there's a lot of controversy over the idea of, can I, as the not author, do I have the ability to tweak an authentic resource? And my answer to that is, well, it depends on what you're doing. But that's something that I do. And in fact, I'm going to show you an example of a resource that has the culture, that has the cultural information that is so relevant to the discussion that I wanted to have, but it's inaccessible to my students without me going in and just being mindful of how that information is presented. And so I pare it down, because the conversation that I get to have afterward, the impact that information has is more valuable if they can access it at a pared down level than if they couldn't access it and we only had to have the conversation in English. So of those two choices, I say go for it. And the other piece too is that it's a part of my formative classroom experience. It's not necessarily my summative assessment. My summative assessments are unmodified, authentic resources. And so what I do day to day to lead up to success there is I tweak and modify as I need, because it's a part of a progressive step getting to that challenge at the end that I know that they're prepared for, because they saw those modified authentic pieces as we go. All right, awesome conversation. We're not going to get anywhere today. All right, let's keep going. So that being said, one of the reasons why I think authentic materials, I mentioned this yesterday, one of the reasons why I think authentic materials are so valuable for us is that these authentic materials are building our students' tolerance for ambiguity. Definitely on the linguistic front, which we're familiar with tolerance for ambiguity in a linguistic context. And so long as they're dealing with these materials successfully, we are enhancing their ability to handle the ambiguity of language that they don't know. So long as we can get them to walk away and say, I did it, it's okay, I don't need to know everything. I think that that's valuable in the long run. What I mentioned yesterday was when we are using authentic materials, when we're using culture as content in our classrooms, we are also seeking to develop a cultural tolerance for ambiguity that I think is equally as useful for our students. In other words, when we're using materials from the target culture, we're promoting intercultural communication, especially when we're trying to dig into those perspectives. And we know that intercultural communicators, they're more tolerant, they're more empathetic, they're more able to speak with cultural competence in mind. And to summarize, they make better neighbors, period. That's what I always go back to. These are people that I want living next to me. All right, anyway. So, man, you got me all riled up. It's 11 o'clock here, but I know for some of you it's even earlier. Okay. So, here's one of the ways that I think if you are new to teaching culture as content, this is a foolproof lesson template that I encourage you to test out. This for again, if you're new to this, your training wheels are on, there are guardrails in place, then this is in essence a lesson template that you can use in any language at any level, modified to meet your needs. And this is called the image model. This was initially coming out of Glisson and Donato when they did their high leverage teaching practices, but I want to walk you through what happens in an image model lesson. And I have to be honest, when I say lesson, oftentimes I'll use the image model over the course of multiple lessons, because each of these steps really could have multiple components here. But nonetheless, the first thing that you want to do in an image model lesson is you're going to display some sort of image, right? And that's a very loose term. It could be an image, it could be a video, it could be lots of things, but some sort of something that's going to really hook your students' curiosity and attention. At that point, you want to facilitate making observations. If you are familiar at all with like a see, think, wonder protocol, this is a perfect application for you to guide your students into really kind of working through what are they viewing with those images. Once we've established their curiosity, once we've hooked them in, the next step is that you want to allow your students to then analyze additional information about the product or the practice that they're observing. And so this is the opportunity for you to expand their worldview a little bit. If you have an authentic material, if you have an authentic text, this is a beautiful time for it. Even if you don't have an authentic text, but maybe your images were initially authentic, then this is a really good time to provide additional context for what they're seeing. Once you've done that, then the next step is to allow your students some time to play with this new information, in particular, to generate hypotheses about cultural perspectives. One of the things that I didn't mention before about how valuable using authentic materials are is that it allows me to not be the cultural expert. I mean, that is so messy for so many reasons. But when I get to say, it's not what I'm saying, it's what this author is saying. And then when we're generating hypotheses, we're doing so based on somebody else. We're doing so based on somebody from that target culture. And we're saying, well, this person believes that this product means this perspective, or this person believes. And so my job is no longer the cultural expert, but rather the cultural facilitator. Oh, and it's such a better place to be than to try to pretend like I know everything. And again, I'm not even an expert of my own culture. Let's be real, right? I have no business being the expert of somebody else's culture. And then lastly, we get to explore, and there's so many things that you can do above and beyond once you move through those steps. So that being said, what I want to do is I want to demonstrate this. We can do this together. I'm going to ask for your participation in the chat to the extent that you want to participate in the chat. We're already a half hour into the session, and so I'm going to try to kind of go through this relatively quickly, but nonetheless, I want you to experience what this could be like on the student end. As I mentioned, this is something that might take multiple days, and I'm going to try to do it in really short shrift here. So let's start. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you an image. And the first thing that I'm going to ask is for you to just in the chat, tell me what you see. What do you see in this image? Street art, beautiful. A woman standing in front of a mural, love it, love it. An indigenous woman, we say. Can someone expand on why you say indigenous woman? What more are you seeing? What's giving you that impression? Aaron's saying some kind of an animal that I'm unfamiliar with. A capybara. She's seeing a hat. Jason recognizing the cuy. Una ratita. Una ratita, says Giselle, con una bandera con un corazón. Una mujer enfrente de la bandera. So she's saying a little rat with a flag that has a heart on it. And there's a woman in front of her, in front of the flag. Holding a flag with a heart, a native from a South American country. But why? Tell me why. What's giving you that impression that this is a native woman from a South American country? Gisela's already saying Bolivia. Ecuador. Okay. All right, so we're seeing the clothes, says Aaron. Beautiful. And listen, what I would be doing with my students is I would be drawing them in to all of these aspects, right? If you're saying, well, I see a Native woman. Well, what do you know about the Native? Well, I see that her dress is different. I'm going to go take a detour about what you're wearing, what I'm wearing, and how that might be different, right? So this is going to be a really broad conversation where I'm going to just, again, I'm the conversation facilitator. And we're gonna really go at everything that we see. Okay, I saw somebody mention el cuy. If you don't know what a cuy is, what's a cuy? What is the cuy? Someone mentioned a ratita. I don't know about the ratita, but a cuy. It's a delicious rodent, says Jason. A cuy is a guinea pig. Indeed. So what we're looking here, and someone mentioned a mural, street art of a guinea pig. Would you say that this mural is a small mural or a big mural? Yeah, we're saying it's a big mural. We have this woman to scale, right? This is a ginormous mural. And this is indeed a mural that is from Ecuador. So this giant mural, does this tell me that this, and someone else said, they mentioned like the idea that the symbolism of the heart, is this going to tell us that this animal is probably not important or may be very important in Ecuador? Just based on the size of this mural, does that give you any kind of inclination? Gisela's saying important. I would agree with that. We tend not to make really ginormous murals unless they tend to have some really important significance, right? What are some things that our community here on Zoom, what are some things that we associate with a guinea pig? How do we interact with a guinea pig? All the cuddles. Yeah, definitely. So we had, right, they're pets here in the United States, right? We cuddle them, we snuggle them, they're a pet. They're a classroom pet, says Parker. And what do we do with pets? We feed them, right? We care for them. We spend money on them. We give them medicine when they're sick. Karen's saying, well, sometimes we use them for animal testing. That is true. Karen's saying, I would never eat my pet. Right? And for a little teacher timeout, one of the things that I like to do when I begin an image model is I like to establish our community's kind of baseline, our baseline associations with whatever that cultural piece that we're focusing on, because this will help as we kind of go through, and it will create fodder for the cultural comparison that happens throughout. All right, so we're saying we sometimes we test on them, but sometimes we care for them. They're pets, we love them. And so what do these practices tell us about our values and our beliefs? Again, we had mentioned, like, we think they're cute, right? Sometimes we think they're family members. Sometimes, again, we think that they can provide really important medical information. So these are all things that are beliefs within our community, within our culture community in this room. Okay, now I should say another little teacher timeout. I am very proudly from Philadelphia. And so when I use this mural and people say, oh my God, a giant rodent mural, we would never. Let me tell you, here in Philadelphia, we have a couple. We're known for our murals in Philadelphia. I didn't know if you knew that. But this right here is a giant raccoon with a Philly pretzel. Okay. This right here is a giant squirrel with our bus token. Okay. Okay. So again, talking about cultural comparisons before we get on our high horse, very proudly Philadelphian. All right. So anyway, so we had talked about, I showed you that animal. I want to get in a little bit deeper here about what this animal could represent. Okay, so I'm going to move on, and this is where I'm going to provide you all I'm going to provide you all a text. In this case, I have a video that we're going to watch. Now, if we were in person, if we had more time, this would be an opportunity where we would potentially partner up, and this would be a structured interpretation. But because we're by ourselves, I'm going to task each of us individually to jot down practices that we hear in this video and to jot down perspectives that we hear in this video. If you were here yesterday, hopefully you feel comfortable with identifying practices and perspectives. If not, go along for the ride, okay? But what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a video. This is an individual. Let's see, this is
Guinea pig.
all right. So this is an individual who is an au pair. She's serving as an au pair. There are some flags in the background. I don't know, Finland, Norway. Somebody will tell me. But she's serving as an au pair. She's originally from Peru. And she's going to tell you about the experience of working with a family that has a guinea pig as a pet. And so this is a couple minutes long. If you're able to turn up your volume, I would recommend doing that. The volume's not the best. The video quality isn't the best either. But what she has to tell us, I think, is really insightful. So I'm going to give you an opportunity to turn up the volume a little bit, and we will start right now. We're not going to go all 4 minutes here.
Guinea pig in Spanish, which is quite funny. The only word is cuy. That would be C-U-Y, cuy. And or cuys are really, they're huge in my country. Like in India, would be their cows. Peru, their guinea pigs is like important. For us, guinea pigs are magical. It's so magical. Well, not everybody believes the same, but it's a really big tradition from the highland. And the highland is between the jungle and the coast. So everybody knows about the guinea pigs. If you have a guinea pig and you rub it all over your body, you're going to have good luck. So that's a thing. And the main bank in my country made their own publicity about the guinea pig because it's supposed to give you good luck and money. So it's that important in my country. And there are songs about guinea pigs and there are parties with guinea pigs. Speaking of parties with guinea pigs, we have this huge event. When what you will have a barbecue here, what we have in Peru, it's also barbecue, but we have games. And one of the games is setting different boxes around on the ground, on the grass, different boxes in different colors. Everybody gets a ticket for their box. So if I have a ticket, it means that one of the boxes is mine. And then the guinea pig is in the middle under like a big cup. The guinea pig can see. So they move it a little bit so the guinea pig can get dizzy. Sometimes people give them a little bit of alcohol. It's not good, but it's funny. And then they move it a little bit. They move the guinea pig a little bit and the guinea pig goes all dizzy. And people start yelling because you want the guinea pig to get into your box. If it gets into your box, you win. So because everybody's screaming, the guinea pig is running everywhere. It's not bad to the animal. I'm pretty sure he has fun. And if it gets into your box, you win, and then they give you something like a small present. And the guinea pig is safe. They go back to their house, to their box, and everything is good. But yeah, that's a guinea pig. Also, we don't have them as pets, so we don't have guinea pigs in our house because they're usually stinky, and they need the grass and they need to be free, and we need to eat them. So in my country, we eat guinea pigs. I never had guinea pigs, so don't look at this one bad. But my mom has. She really likes guinea pigs. She actually really likes guinea pigs, and it's weird. It's one guinea pig per person. Unless you're poor and you want to share it. But it's one guinea pig per person. And you eat it with potatoes. And people say that the paws is the best part. The leg. I don't know. It looks
Okay. So we're gonna pause. We're gonna pause there. First of all, teacher timeout. I would never in 1,000 years take a video like this and be like, okay, students, and watch. And this is one of the reasons why I say the image model might take a really long time, or it might take more time than it seems, is because like any text that I provide for my students, I'm doing a pre-reading or a previewing activity to set it up. We're doing some during activities, for example, what you guys were doing, kind of pulling out relevant information. And then we'll also be doing some sort of comprehension checks afterward to make sure that we can all move on together, right? So I would still be doing that within this image model. So anyway, that being said, I can take for granted that we understood that. And so what we want to do now is the next step is to generate hypotheses. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to present to you an image. And what I'm going to ask you to do, I'm going to give us about 60 seconds and you can feel free to respond in the chat. What I'm going to ask that you do is I want you to put on your cultural investigator hat, and I want you to interpret the practice that you are viewing in these images. And the way that you're going to do that is you're going to describe the practice and you're going to connect it with a perspective that you heard from our author. So you could say, in the image, I am seeing X because some people believe Y, for example. Okay, so I'm going to give you 60 seconds to interpret these images. What are you seeing? What are you seeing? 60 seconds. Try to interpret those images in the chat. Take another moment. Martha says, in the image, I see cuy roasting. Absolutely. This is one of the popular ways to eat cuy, the cuy asado, served on a plate with salad because they are a popular food source in Andean countries. And I really like that Martha mentioned Andean cultures in particular. Notice that we started with an image from Ecuador. Our source text, the author that we're relying on to provide insight, she was actually from Peru. What do they have in common? They have a geographical region in common, the Andes Mountains. And I agree. So what does that have to do with anything? How come in Philadelphia, if I wanted to go have lunch, I might just go have, I don't know, I'll go have a cheesesteak. How come this little girl's not eating a cheesesteak? How come instead she's eating roasted cuy? What is it about maybe where we're from? Alejandro says roasting a cuy for a meal, it's a main source of protein. Absolutely. Martha says it's difficult to raise cattle in the Andes Mountains. Absolutely right. Not only is it difficult to raise cattle, geographically speaking, but economically speaking, it's difficult to raise cattle, right? And again, this is where let's tie in some of the economic influences. It takes time, it takes money, it takes terrain to raise cow, only to get a meal later on down the road. And then once you have the meal, then you need refrigeration, you need freezers, versus a cuy. You can raise a cuy in a function of a few weeks and you can get a meal immediately with no waste, right? And the cuys will multiply like guinea pigs. Get it? Okay. Here, let's try again. I'm going to show you, this time I'm not going to show you an image. I'm going to show you a 1-minute video clip. And you guys are the cultural investigators. You tell me in the chat, try to interpret what are we seeing and why are we seeing it, okay? Here's Let's take a look. Let's take a look. All right, take a moment. Let's see in the chat. Who can interpret what's going on here? If you had a friend who just goes, what am I seeing? What would you tell them? Alejandro says the curandera is doing a limpia, a cleanse to clear something. Mal de ojo, evil spirits, mala suerte. Martha says the woman is touching the cuy to specific parts of the man's body because they have cultural beliefs about the power of the cuy. Does anybody remember our source text said says that the cuy in fact can bring good luck. Myrna says that the cuy, some believe it has magical powers. Some people are saying that there's a tradition. Absolutely. If the curandera is helping with some pain, right? You saw he was indicating his shoulder, and so the shaman was sure to put the cuy over to the shaman because the belief is, according to our text, that the cuy has these magical healing powers as well. Nice. Good job. Good job. Good job. All right. How about this? How about this? Can you put in the chat? What are we seeing here? A cuy farm. A guinea pig farm. Someone is raising cuys to feed their family. A room full of cuys. Many cuy on the ground. They're cuys, says Alejandro. They're sheltering the source of their food. It's very important. Oh, wait a second. Some of you guys are saying, so Alejandro is saying inside the home. Some of you are saying cuys in the room. But wait, I thought, right, the text that we had said that cuys don't go inside the house. Why? Because cuys are stinky. But wait, that's what she said. So what? Is she wrong? If we're seeing cuys inside the home, all right, teacher time out here. Teacher time out. I am a really firm believer of presenting contradictory evidence to cultural source texts. I think that it's in our students' best interest to recognize that culture is not monolithic and that it's very difficult to find a singular spokesperson for all perspectives and all practices. And so even though our initial source text said, cuys, they never go inside because they're stinky, they smell bad. But wait a second. Here we have an image of, in fact, cuys inside. Could I guide my students into maybe, again, just generating hypotheses, perhaps, of the socioeconomic conditions, maybe that our initial author was from, versus what we're seeing here, and how that might influence the practices that both may associate with this product? I think that would be a really wise conversation to facilitate. Okay, so at this point, we played around with the initial source text. we have been generating hypotheses that kind of make sense of this product. And we're seeing kind of practices and perspectives that we associate with it. And now we get to kind of do whatever else that we would like to be doing. We can kind of go and make this make sense for us. So maybe there were some unanswered questions, in which case I'm going to say you for homework, you're on it. Or let's all figure it out together. Oftentimes when we generate hypotheses together in a class, again, I don't like to be the cultural expert. And so if I think like, ooh, that's a really good idea, I'm going to tell a kid like, hey, really quick, whip out your phone, Google it. Let's see if that's right. Let's see if we can confirm the hypothesis together. And so again, we can kind of get, confirmation that way. We can explore these 3 Ps a little bit more deeply. We can make cultural comparisons. If we hadn't already done this, this is a great time to kind of go backward now, kind of get into a Venn diagram of us, our cultural community versus what we saw in those images. Maybe there's some language related theme that you want to tap into now. Or maybe you could participate in one of the practices that you saw. I mean, would I ever in 1,000 years get a guinea pig in my classroom to play the guinea pig lotto? Is that something that I would do? Maybe. Maybe it is. Yes, I'm not better than that. It is in fact something that I did. I promise you, we didn't get the guinea pig drunk though. Okay. All right. So that is the image model. That is the image model. And again, you can do this at any level. You can do this at any language with any cultural topic. One of the questions that I get asked often is, well, you know, are you using English or are you using the target language? And this is where I kind of go back to what we had talked about yesterday. And that is, I absolutely am using the image model in a novice level. The difference is, how am I presenting information to my students? And also, how am I scaffolding my students to interact with that information? At the novice level, when we're making observations, I'm a big fan of having them like make checklist observations. So I might give them 20 items, 20 things, maybe 10 of them are relevant to what they're seeing. And so they're going to check that off. But I will also maybe prompt, if I wanted to preempt the cultural nuance conversation, I might also have things that I know are not there, but are like pretty relevant to the conversation that they're not there. And so not only are we able to talk about what we're seeing, we could also talk about how it's relevant what we're not seeing. And that's just a checklist. So they're not producing any language. I'm the one facilitating the conversation, and they're just kind of checking along. So that is, yes, I have seen the Peru, Nebraska. It is a tremendous video. Definitely Google it. Okay.
Rich,
yeah.
if I may, a good question from Parker. She wants you to comment about balancing the use of the target language in English when following the image framework, I believe is what she's referring to.
So I will always say the absolute, just maximize the target language possible. In preparing something like this, I will prepare ahead of time so that all of the information that I want to present, I'm going to do it in the target language. So all the ways that I make myself comprehensible day to day, I'm going to use those strategies to do so. Obviously, I can't prepare for every single reaction that my students might have. And so to the extent that some students may have certain interpretations in English, I might let that happen, and then I will react. I will respond to their interpretation. I'll reframe and recast their interpretation in our target language so that we can maintain the conversation. That's something that might happen. I had mentioned yesterday, especially for novices, I'm a really big fan of like signal tasks. My students will have like a set of colored papers. And so I might show them something, and if I want their reaction, I'm going to give them 5 options of reactions, and I'm going to tell them to just like lift up the color that most closely matches their reaction, so that I can get everybody's input without them having to produce, and I can kind of circumvent their needing to use English. All right, somebody's saying, can I see the guinea pig video again? Which guinea pig video? This one? I'll tell you what, I'll give you all of the resources in this session after we're all done, because I want to kind of really quickly, I want to show you how I might vary this image model. Once you're comfortable with the image model, there are ways that you can really kind of personalize it and play with it. And so I want to show you something that I do with my students that I actually have them do this independently. I want them to go on a cultural exploration on their own. And so we're reading a novel, kind of back to Parker's point, we're reading Blancanieves y los siete toritos, and it has to do with bullfighting in Spain. And I want to get into, I want to take a deep dive into the cultural controversy of bullfighting. And so what I do is I have my students explore on a Nearpod. And on that Nearpod, I have them explore two different cultural products. In this case, the product are these really famous Plaza de Toros in Spain. And so the first thing that they do is this Nearpod sends them on a Google Maps exploration. I really want them to see just how enormous the Plaza de Toros is in Madrid. And so I want them to get down in there. I want them to really see the enormity of this cultural product. I want them to feel the weight of something like this. I want them to go, just for their own curiosity's sake, I want them to go get inside. I want them to, again, kind of really see how impressive these structures are. Because afterwards, I'm going to ask them to kind of give me their descriptions. What are they seeing? Is it big? Is it small? And I'm also going to ask them to document their hypothesis. So therefore, do they think Spaniards like bullfighting? Do they think that this is really important in their culture? So I'm going to ask them to really establish their hypothesis. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to send them to Barcelona. And similarly, I'm going to have them go to a different bullfighting arena, this time in Barcelona. So they're going to go over here. And this time, they're going to take a look outside. And they're going to say, okay, I recognize it, right? I recognize this is a bullfighting arena. I'm familiar with this. I'm comfortable for this. And I'm going to prompt them to go inside. And when they go inside, they're going to see this. And very naturally, I'm going to have kids go, oh, profe, Google Maps is broken. Google Maps is broken. Where are the bulls? And so that's what I'm going to get. And so in this case, I don't need for them to document their descriptions. I'm hearing it from them, right? But at this point, they are so hooked. Their curiosity is so hooked that this is the point where I say, no, just keep going on your Nearpod. And what I'm going to do next is I'm then going to provide for them a text that is going to give them additional context that's going to explain that Plaza de Toros in Barcelona, in fact, has been reconverted into a shopping mall. Why? Because Catalunya outlawed bullfighting in that region of Spain. And so once they get this information, they analyze this information, I'm going to have them go back to their hypothesis. I want them to revisit it, and I want them to reevaluate it with the new information that they got. And so for my students that said, yeah, the Spaniards love bullfighting, well, all of a sudden, they're going to have to come to a more nuanced conclusion of, oh, maybe some like it and some don't, or maybe it's losing favor. And then once they get to that point, they'll come back to me and we can continue the conversation. And so if I go back to, again, what we expect out of the image model, I explained, they saw images in multiple different times. They made observations the first time, and then the second time, they really just made like outlandish reactions. They analyzed information when it was relevant. They generated hypotheses at multiple intervals. And then they will explore the perspectives even further with me after the fact. And we'll go for days, for a couple days, we'll explore the controversy. But this is really a good way to set up the controversy and set up that it's messy, right? We establish early on that there are multiple perspectives, and then we get to play with them over the course of a few days. So I took a lot of liberties with the image model because, again, I'm comfortable with kind of how to interweave it. Okay, the last thing that I want to show us, I know that we have 15 minutes, so I'm going to fly through this, but I also think that it's relevant. I use a very acquisition-driven approach to my classroom. And so there's a lot of storytelling that goes on in my classroom. I believe that if you really want to kind of go culture forward, that one of the ways that you do that is that you enhance your stories by setting them in your target culture. And by doing that, you can pull in cultural products, you can pull in cultural practices. You can do something that I call breaking the fourth wall with your students. And that is, I will tell a story that is designed such that the characters in my story are going to interact with an authentic resource. And then I get to then pass that authentic resource around. We get to interpret it. And then we get to go back into the story with that knowledge and move forward. And so by doing this in the context of a story, it automatically is providing context and purpose for us to engage with that resource. And so this is an example of a story. You're going to recognize some of the resources, but I'm just doing it in a way that's embedded in a story. And so I tell a story about this teacher who disappears. And this is just TPRS style storytelling. And so we set up the problem where a couple of my friends from Dectful, they need to go find the teacher that disappeared. And so they're, and then they go somewhere. And this going somewhere provides an opportunity for me to maybe do a little bit of a map talk where I'm going to preempt where are they going. And then once they get somewhere, all of a sudden, look at this. I can get into a picture talk and we can talk about where they ended up. They enter the cathedral, and where they enter the cathedral, they see a piece of art. And all of a sudden, this piece of art, this is as good of an authentic text. We use that word text really broadly. This piece of art is a perfectly fine opportunity to get into another picture talk. Again, we could do that checklist observation. What are we seeing? What are we not seeing? We can do some sentence stem observations. If you notice, this is the kui. And so this is just, again, kind of going through the same cultural product as before, but in a different context because I'm telling a story about it. And so then they leave and, oh my God, look at where they ended up. Do you recognize it? But again, I'm doing a picture talk again. We can go through these same strategies. And then, wait, they keep seeing this kui. Let's go find new information. And so again, this is all rehashing. I'm not reinventing the wheel here. And so we get to play around with this text. This is a structured interpretation, just like last time, so I can ensure comprehension. And then my characters, they go explore some more with their cultural knowledge. And oh, look, they're seeing these things again. Again, this is an opportunity for another picture talk. This is an opportunity to recycle the text and go back and use the text to interpret what we're seeing. Again, a kind of personalized question and answering. Well, what is our practices? You know, again, just rehashing and recycling all the same stuff, but in a different context, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, that was a lot. That was a lot. And I gave ourselves 10 minutes, which is awesome. Myrna says, what text or novel do I use for the kui? In Spanish 1A, I use, I don't know if I have it. I use the Llama en Lima. It's like such a dopey text, but it's perfect for 1A. And one of the characters is a kui. And so I just, why not? I go on a tangent to talk about the kui. And you know what? I say in my level 3, we use the Bianca Nieves y los Siete Toritos, and she has a pet. She has a pet bull. And so I also talk about the kui in my level 3 when we just talk about funky pets. Then there's a video of a woman that has the kuis as pets. And so, you know, any opportunity to just go talk about interesting stuff, I make the most of. Would there be an assessment associated with this lesson? Honestly, Parker, if I wanted there to be, I'm not a huge fan of like overdoing assessments. I do assessment obviously to inform my practice in a very formative sense. And I do use, as a program, we use the integrated performance assessment. In the integrated performance assessment, we use the interpretive assessment. We will always use an authentic material. And so part of that, part of the interpretation of that authentic text is the cultural interpretation, because again, we talked about how there is culture embedded in it. So I will make sure that we are ending up there. I use PowerPoint to make the digital stories. I've used PowerPoint for so long. There's a lot of animations that go along in that. It's a weird flex. It actually makes me look like a dork, but yeah, I'm too comfortable with PowerPoint. So is this unit for level 1? Honestly, this is something that I created just for teachers. I do use, like, again, I use the images. Some of the images that I use, I will use them in my classroom, but not in the context that I used here. This was really created for you guys. Yeah, listen, my students are way too easily impressed with technology. Martha, I don't know what you can buy for me, but I'm going to give you everything. I'm going to give you a copy of this presentation, and then also all of the resources. I'll make sure that I give it to Grant. I'll give you a folder that has the video clips, that has also the images that were used. I'll make sure that it's all in that folder. But that way you'll have it separate from the slides as well. So if you give maybe, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes after this session, I'll make sure that Grant has access to it all. Are there any other questions that we have? Thanks, Jeannie. That's really nice of you to say.